Nicholas Craig is probably the most famous face you can't quite put a name to. In a 35-year career, he strutted and fretted his hour upon just about every stage, film set and advertising studio there is. As McKendrick, US TV's cantankerous osteopath.
Why is there no clavicular contusion? And where the hell is my cranberry juice?
He's probably caused more back problems among sofa-bound viewers than he's relieved on screen. Craig has in his time played many parts. He first became known mewling and puking in his award-winning Atrocitus for the National Theatre. But his shining morning face had been seen decades earlier at the 1962 Aldborough Festival in Benjamin Britten's chamber opera, The Poor Little Cabin Boy. He began the 7 ages of his film career as a soldier. Welsh soldier was shell-shocked to give him his internet movie database listing in A Bridge Too Far. As for the lover, 30 years of romantic leads have left his ardour undiminished, and he'll appear later this year in the new Richard Curtis film Nice Kissing. Not quite ready then to slide into the lean and slippered pantaloon. Although his widow Twankey at Watford Palace Theatre last Christmas evoked scary memories of gaslit grotesques of the music hall era, leading parents and children alike to wonder just who exactly is Nicholas Craig. So Nicholas Craig, I want to start with that paradox, a busy career, major roles, but not recognisable in the way of a Branagh, a McKellen, a Jacobi. Why haven't more people heard of you?
Well, I mean, you should see the letters. I mean, you should see the McKendrick post bag. But no, I know what you mean. And I think the problem is that I've actually, well, I've probably done too much. I mean, if I'd maybe stuck to the one thing, you know, if I'd just done theatre or telly or movies, I might have been, well, I wouldn't have had a better career, because I wouldn't change a nanosecond of it, you know, remotely, but I might have had a better press. I mean, not that that's, you know, why one does it, of course, remotely, or for the awards, which, I mean, don't actually mean anything. I mean, when you get to my age, one lustrous bauble more or less in the loo is neither here nor there. But I think it's probably the scope of one's work that the press can't handle. I mean, the Panto, the Chekhov, the Atrocitus, the McKendrick, and the writing, of course.
I read a story. I think you were filming Moby Dick on the west of Ireland, and to get into the role is you asked the hotel staff to wake you up every 2 hours through the night, throw cold seawater in your face. Is that true?
Yes, that's always the thing they pick out. Look, I mean, it's a way of doing it. Some actors turn up on the set, script still in its envelope, open it up, grab a bacon butty, gulp of coffee, and wallop there in front of the camera. Fantastic, I'm very happy for them. But I have to rootle about a bit. I mean, I have to sniff a character out, you know, get the smack and tang, get the flavour. It's very much like cookery, you know, except, of course, you're in a strange kitchen without the faintest bloody idea where the turmeric's kept. I mean, your sister would know all about this. But you're right, I do take on an insane range of roles, and I think I probably would have been better off, well, I definitely would have been better off if I'd, you know, chosen to be a regional manager for Rexel Staplers with a regular paycheck and quite a bit less stress, you know. But seriously, I think I might have been more tabloid friendly if I'd limited myself to one type of character. I mean, take Charlie Dance. He does handsome, slightly untrustworthy, fabulous. Jeremy Irons, handsome, flawed, bit of a sad sack, bang, you know. Tim Pigott-Smith, policeman with a wonky smile. Wonderful, wonderful performers. And they keep it so simple. I mean, that's the trick. But I have a kind of a pathological aversion to the obvious. And I get bored bloody arseless unless I'm creating new dishes, you know, like the Atrocitus, like the McKendrick, and like the Twankey. And the writing, of course.
Let's forget the writing for the moment. You're known to the extent that you are known for acting. Where did all that begin?
Well, I think one of the greatest of many misconceptions about me is that somehow I come from this rather comfortable theatrical background, whereas actually I was born in Streatham. Money was quite tight for most of my childhood. Things like looking for the black cornflake in the bottom of the box, because if you found one you could send it off to Kellogg's and they gave you half a dozen packets free. Things like that. I mean, it worked with crisps too, actually. If you found a black crisp, I still look for them. Of course, with these new beetroot crisps, you have to be a bit careful not to jump the gun. But I think that foxy instinct for survival against the odds never quite leaves you.
What did your parents do?
Oh, they ran a drama school. Well, it was more of a music and dance conservatory, really. But for Mim, teaching was her life. My mother, hair scraped back in a bun, black practice skirt, one of her lovely leotards. And sometimes in the school holidays, I'd help by playing the piano for her classes, and at the end they had to curtsy to us and say, "Thank you, Madam Beryl, thank you, Nicholas," which was hilarious. I used to do probably rather cruel impressions of her students to make her laugh. So, I mean, I was completely obnoxious even then. But even then, I had what Graham Greene, I think it was, called that sliver of ice that every artist needs to appropriate what's useful without sentiment or remorse. So, not particularly pleasant, but there we are.
Although listening to you, I'm thinking less of the sliver of ice than the cornflake, the black cornflake at the back of the packet. It strikes me that that's what you've done as an actor, is looking for the black cornflake at the heart of a character, the rejected, the misshapen, the grotesque. And you've turned that into a way of, professionally, of getting a free breakfast.
Well, no. I mean, it's not. I mean, one doesn't. Except, of course, you do. Don't you? I mean, when you're filming, you do get a free breakfast. I mean, that's absolutely right. Yes, I'd never quite thought of it like that. I mean, that's terribly clever of you, Mark. So I suppose, yes, it did all start with the impressions at Bladder. I think beginnings are so important, don't you? I mean, I'm very interested to know how you started, Mark. I mean, did you first develop an interest in popular television when you were at Oxford?
Well, this is about you, not me, but in fact, I went to UCL.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's terribly interesting. Terribly. Is that where you first started interviewing people?
Well, people are watching this because of Nicholas Craig, but it's arts journalism. Interviewing is just part of it.
Yes, it's a terribly difficult world, isn't it? Terribly difficult. Especially, I should think, recently with the advent of the blog. You know, some of these art blogs have made you, well, people like you, virtually redundant, haven't they?
Well, we do think about that, yes.
I mean, and the sheer volume, that's what amazes me, the amount of programmes that you have to make. I mean, you're thinking of your own questions, and then you have to go and shop for good luck cards and presents, I mean, virtually every day. I mean, you must spend your whole life in paper chase.
Well, it's not
a
really...
nightmare. What do you get Philip Roth, by the way?
Well, it doesn't really work like that. I mean, Jilly Cooper brought me a present, but that's unusual. Generally, we just give people a glass of BBC wine.
Oh, well, you make your own wine as well?
Well, not that I know of, but getting back to Bladder, an unusual name for a drama school.
Well, no,
it stood for Beryl Lopez.
No, Bladder was the school was called, and still is, actually, believe it or not. The Beryl Lopez Academy for Dance and Dramatic Art is what it stood for, which was Mim's stage name. And she'd take classes, as I say, in black always, with a stick, of course, because she'd been with Madam at the Vic Wells, so it was quite strict, making them trot around the conservatory like ponies. But, you know, it worked. I mean, they always used Mim's students in the panto. I was a Bladder babe, 4 years running at the Empress. Had to sing a sausage song with dear old Squudge Butterworth. Sing a sizzling sausage. It's breakfast again, you see. I think you're on something there, Mark. He came on in a bubble car.
Just for non-theatricals, Squudge Butterworth is Peter Butterworth, known to a lot of people for the Carry On films. The Empress is the Brixton Empress Theatre. Presumably, though, that experience 50 years later, when you came to play a dame, that must have helped you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Dame, you just have to bloody well, get on and do it. Panto, there's no time. I mean, sod in Panto, it's never mind staring up your own arse for the truth of the character. They've all gone home, dear. Wig on, rolled up socks for tits, and on you bloody go. And actually, I think that's what all acting should be, really. I mean, for Christ's sake, it's not rocket science, is it? Although actually Michael Frayn tells me that rocket science is a doddle compared with writing a play. But, there's been so much crap written about acting, mostly by me, I should say, before anyone else does. But you asked me about pantomime, and I think what instantly ravished me was the contrast between backstage, tatty, peeling, seedy, and the gilded splendour of the front of house, that fragile distinction between image and reality. I think probably everything I've ever done, acting and writing, has been about image and reality in one way or another.
That's interesting. You'd say that even about your cat poems.
Oh, especially the cat poems. I mean, if you think about it, Puss Floristan is a consummate fibber. I mean, he lies, so image and reality. And the Maharaja of Madhipur, much as he'd have you believe otherwise, is a penniless fraud. So, which is why he eventually ends up in the poorhouse. So, I mean, terrible jokes, but it's meant to be enjoyed. And when I do the readings with Eleanor Bron at the Festival Hall at Christmas, we sell out. I mean, God knows how many CDs we sign. Well, I mean, I sit at the table and Eleanor goes round with the AIDS bucket, but everyone has a ball, which is why I think the poems would make such a great Christmas special for telly. I mean, it's obvious, really. I don't know why they don't just make it, And anyway, we'll see.
So appearing in that first pantomime with Squidge Butterworth, was that the breakthrough moment, this is what I want to do?
Squidge Butterworth. No, I think that probably came when I told my first theatrical anecdote. We were asked to stand up in school assembly and tell a story, and I came out with, I think it might have been Queen Saloti of Tonga at the coronation, or Nellie Melba's stagehands, not sure. I was only 11, but I had the most vast fund of theatre stories, and in a way they became my armour, I suppose.
Obviously, I'm desperate to avoid that bit of armchair psychology about the comedian using humour to deflect the playground bullies.
Oh, yeah, yes, isn't that most awful cliche? As soon as I hear that, I'm plunged into the depths of existential gloom. It ought to be banned from interviews forever and capital punishment reinstated for perpetrators. Yet, in a way, I think it is profoundly true because, well, I had pretty good timing. So I think most playground bullies knew they couldn't tell a Sybil Thorndike story quite as well as me, and they just avoided me. So it worked a treat. And in those days, of course, Equity held a theatrical anecdote competition at the Denville Home, and I actually won the under-17 age group. I did Larry Olivier with the shower pipe. You know, the one when he's trying to corpse Coral Brown with a cucumber in Glasgow. And the door gets stuck, and Johnny G comes on through the fireplace and says, "Whoosh, all over my lunch." Well, he did in my version anyway. Well, I won a shoulder bag, my very first shoulder bag. Didn't take it off for about 10 years. But afterwards, it was absolutely thrilling because they took us all the finalists, to a Chinese restaurant. And we ended up singing songs from the shows in different regional accents at the top of our voices. Virtually emptied the place. We were unbearable. And I thought, yes, more of this, please.
There's a passage I've marked from your autobiography, which is over 600 pages long, about your identification with your mother. You describe visitors to Sadler's Wells. Once, during a matinee of Sleeping Beauty, you say, you shouted out, don't touch the needle, Princess Aurora. Yeah. And there's also an entire chapter in which you and your mother tidy up the garage at home, but there's no mention at all of your father.
Well, you see, he left us when I was quite young. I saw him from time to time. But to answer the unspoken suggestion underlying your last remark, Mark, I did have male influences in my childhood, notably my teacher at Wandsworth Boys, Mr. Barton, who was an extraordinary man.
I know you've warned me very strongly against psychological cliche, but there is another one that there often is this one individual behind the figure who becomes significant. Very often, in fact, an English teacher.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, the influences? Actually, Mr. Barton was a chemistry teacher, couldn't bear to have me in his lessons, told me to bugger off. So that's how I was able to develop my range. You know, Rosalind, the Virgin Mary, Lord Twitchy Pot, which I did on my own in the gym. But
it was at Wandsworth that you first came across the composer Benjamin Britten. How did that happen? Were you just walking around, or...?
No, that came about through the school choir. Ben came to hear us. He loved the Wandsworth Boys because we didn't have the cathedral hoot, you see. And he'd written The Poor Little Cabin Boy, very much with ordinary boys' voices in mind. So I was chosen to play one of the Powder Monkeys.
Again, from the quiver upbeat at 434,
But of all this stuff that's ever been written about Britain, he never, ever once laid a hand on me. I mean, no, not once. I mean, we were alone on many occasions at Aldborough, in the beach hut, or I'd walk into his bedroom in the Red House to sing him a canticle in my nightshirt, or perhaps after a game of tennis. You know, I'd have a piece of fruit and dribble the juice down my chin, but not once did he lay a finger on me. Not once.
Perhaps he just didn't fancy you.
Yes, quite possibly. Yes, but I think that's the point, you know, and when I read all this stuff about him being a rampant paedophile, I must say I find it all a bit unconvincing. I mean, they've done it to Frankie Howerd too, recently. You know, someone did a book on him accusing him of God knows what. I mean, I did 2 episodes of Up Pompeii, and Frank never even knocked on my dressing room door. I mean, you'd probably say it was because he wasn't attracted to me, but that's exactly what I mean. You know, he wasn't... well, I mean, he was gay, obviously, but I find it absolutely absurd, this idea that gay men want to have sex with every single guy they meet. I mean, I think you'll find people a little more complicated than that, Mark.
Picking up on Up Pompeii, I think you did that immediately after RADA. It must have been a very interesting period because there were some heavyweight names there at the time. Mike Leigh, I'm thinking, for example.
Really? I don't think... I mean, I'd be surprised if Mike Leigh was in Up Pompeii. But it was an immensely difficult period. I mean, I just left RADA, and that placed one at a monumental disadvantage. In those days, unless you came from up north, you didn't stand a chance. I mean, it was a wonderful time to be Jim Broadbent or Pete Postlethwaite, and I'm sure it still is a wonderful time to be Jim or Pete, or Alan Armstrong. But in those days, unless you were plug ugly and spoke like a shop steward, you couldn't get arrested. I mean, it was terribly unfair because I was genuinely dog rough, you know, born in Streatham, Spanish Jewish on my mother's grandmother's side, smidge of Hungarian, God knows what else. So, you know, most awful mongrel. But you've only got to have one person saying, "Oh, Craig's posh," you know, and that's it. I mean, like you saying that Mike Leigh was in Up Pompeii just now. I mean, it's before you know it, it's a historical fact. But there were auditions in which they'd ask you to start counting. And if you didn't start with 1, 2, they'd say, right, that's it, next please, and kick you down the stairs, literally.
I find it a bit hard to believe that a casting director would kick you out after just one syllable. What sort of auditions were these?
Well, I mean, they took place. It happened to me at the Royal Court.
What was the play?
And it certainly happened to friends of mine.
Who else then? Who else did that happen to?
Were mates. Very, very good mates. Jimpy a good actor friend of mine called Jimpy. But so, it was tough. Of course, it all changed a few years later, when the Rupert Everetts and Hugh Grants came flopping along, and then you couldn't get a job unless you'd been to Eton and owned half of Shropshire. It wasn't enough to be in Spotlight, you had to be in Burke's Bloody Peerage too. Which is more or less the situation we have nowadays. I mean, look at this place. I was sneaking a look at the call sheet just now, and it reads like Lord Snooty's tea party. The BBC is run by the Oxbridge Mafia. I mean, it's all become so respectable. That's the problem with this business now, and the kind of hoorays who once upon a time could have been safely relied upon to disappear into the Foreign Office or the Brigade of Guards and never be heard of again. Now they're all of a sudden head of series or vision, or whatever they call the head of drama this week.
Head of drama, I think Jane Tranter might be a little surprised at the idea that she's a loss to the Brigade of Guards. But let's talk about this. So, despite being a RADA graduate, veteran of Panto, Albury Festival with Britain, youngest ever member of the Garrick Club at 13, you still had this feeling that somehow doors were closed to you.
Yes, I was actually elected when I was 12, chairman of the Costume Library Committee when I was 13. But yes, you're right. Doors were closed. But one of the things about me is if I see a barricade, then in some perverse kind of a way, I have to storm it. I don't know, it's the Irish in me or something. So I refused to give up and finally got Minimus the eunuch in Up Pompeii. And, well, I mean, I wouldn't say it opened the floodgates exactly, but it did lead to a whole string of eunuch parts, Clisthenes, Lychee, Mardian, all in the space of 1 year. So I became the eunuch specialist for the time being.
Troupate in The Cuckold of Leicester.
Yeah, except Troupate's not strictly speaking a eunuch, because he doesn't get castrated with the poker until Act 4, and well, actually, that was 10 years later. So apart from that, you're spot on there, Mark. But it was Lai Chi, the Chinese emperor's eunuch, that was the turning point, obviously, because it got me into radical theatre. Companies like Shared Dressing Room, Red Dungarees, 1974, who were doing such wonderful, important work. 1974 stood for 19% of actors drive 74% of minicabs, or some such statistic. I mean, it probably seems terribly naive nowadays, but these were terrifically powerful pieces of political theatre. And anyone in the audience who was in favour of child prostitution or Polaris missiles or genocide, felt pretty bloody silly by the end of the evening, I can tell you.
You must negotiate, factory owner.
Have you brought a mirror?
No, factory owner.
Then how can I admire myself? Case dismissed. Oh, give me more food in my big doggy bowl, for I must eat my fill. Yes, I must eat my fill.
And it was through working with Shared Dressing Room that I think you first came into contact with the dramatist David Hare.
Oh, David Hare, well, I just devoured his dialogue. I mean, David Hare, the most sublime craftsman, particularly for women, funnily enough. Female actor mates tell me he has such empathy that they can't believe his plays aren't written by a woman. But, I mean, of course, that's not true. I mean, they're not. And, well, David Hare is not a woman. Let's be clear about that. I mean, he's very much... I'm not saying he's a regular guy or a man's man, because that suggests some awful hairy-arsed Lothario, and I mean, he's far more savvy and spry than that, which makes him sound a bit like a camp vicar, and that's not right either. But if you can imagine John Galsworthy in cargo pants with no visible knicker line, but then again, no... You see, even that doesn't begin to do him justice as a writer, so perhaps not pursue that. But working for radical theatre companies, I learnt an awful lot about the greed of the ruling class. I mean, they paid us a pittance. Carol Churchill was always bumming fags, and Edward Bond never bought a pint from one May Day to the next. But I survived, you know, somehow. Those tough little Sephardic genes of mine, that's what it is.
And after that long run of eunuch parts, something bigger comes along, which is Come for Breakfast at the Roundhouse.
Come for breakfast. You have done your homework, Mark. Yes, that was a hoot. Who could forget the dress run of Come? But the Roundhouse was a terrifically exciting place to be at the time. And then when all the religious rock musicals started, one was in absolutely the right place. So I was asked to stay on after Come and do Oh Christ. Very much a musical of its time, Oh Christ. Didn't run tremendously, but it did me an awful lot of good.
You really gotta help me, Lazarus. My daddy's counting on the two of us. Oh yeah, you really gotta help me, Lazarus.
So you had a decade or more of what was pretty much anonymity, slogging around regional reps, profit share political theatre, odd scrap of television work. At this stage, did you just resign yourself to being a jobbing actor?
Well, it wasn't that anonymous, as I say, because of Oh Christ. But yes, at one point I did think, you know, eunuchs, nude musicals, that might be it. I mean, of course, there were a lot of near misses. 1983, I came very close to getting Ronald Merrick, the policeman in Jewel in the Crown, third recall. But they went with Tim Pigott-Smith, and thank God they did, because he was fabulous. And actually, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was free to do Pardon My Privates at the Duchess.
Anyhow, I've fixed us up with Kitty for tonight, and that's final.
Kitty?
Yes.
As in...
Yes. Hello.
I've booked Joanna a room for the night at that little place in the village. What's it called?
Whop it in.
But we've only just been introduced.
Extraordinary play. I never heard laughter like it in a theatre since. Funnily enough, though, when we did the Far Eastern tour of Privates, we actually had to perform in the very hotel where the Jewel in the Crown unit was staying, which was a bit. No, but it was fine, and it was lovely to catch up with Piggy Smith and swap stories.
And Pardon My Privates, that was your way into the world of alternative TV comedy. Rick Mayall and Ben Elton, who wrote it, that now famous radical TV sitcom, they came to see you at the Duchess and they cast you in the pilot.
Yes, well, I mean, I read for them, and I must say to my shame, I didn't think the script was terribly funny. I thought it was rather unpleasant, actually. You know, I remember getting it the night before and thinking, bloody hell. But I auditioned, and they roared and said they liked my postmodern something or other. I mean, I just thought I was playing it as written. Anyway, for whatever reason, they cast me as Gob the Punk, and it was an immediate hit with the youth. I mean, I'm not knocking it because it bought me my first flat in Clapham, and it's lovely that people remember it now. But you know, at the time, dear God, it was. I mean, the recognition. It was like being a pop star or something. You know, they were pulling one about. I mean, what was one supposed to do? You know, offer to have sex with them. Actually, I did have sex with some of them.
What was radical about Oh No, Not Them was that it mocked the conventions of the sitcom, and in fact your character, Gob the Punk, was a satire on the one-dimensional sitcom character. But it opened you up to a whole new audience. People have written about the riotous atmosphere at the TV recordings, the stage show as being like a rock gig.
Yes, you get a gold star for not using the word iconic there, Mark. Yes, a great deal of young flesh loitering around backstage, which I hugely regret not taking advantage of. Like John Betchman, I wish I'd had more sex when I was young. But, you know, I fall in love. That's been my problem. Never with any of the people I was supposed to have fallen in love with, by the way, but once it's appeared in the tabloids that you're dating someone, it's a wonderfully coy phrase, that, it's a fact. Like you saying about Frankie Howerd and Mike Leigh. I mean, that'll go down in some secret history of light entertainment. You see. There'll be a chapter about Frank and Mike scuttling off to the wardrobe room, dating away like a couple of ferrets. I mean, it's never the other way round, is it? I'd love to see a documentary proving that Noel Coward secretly worked as a bank manager in Chelmsford and had a clandestine wife and 3 kids. Now, that I'd watch.
Can I just make clear, I was never suggesting that Mike Leigh was Frankie Howard's lover, or even that he was an up Pompeii. All I was saying is that he was at RADA at the same time you were.
Yes. I know you were saying that. I think Mike was a few years before me, actually. But I knew you weren't saying that. I mean, I was just giving an example of how the media distorts. I mean, I'm not criticising you, Mark, far from it. I think you're doing a jolly good job, and God knows I'm not the easiest nut to crack. I saw from the call sheet that you've got A.S. Byatt to do later on this afternoon, so we'd better get on, because we're only up to 1985, and you ain't cracked me yet, sugar pie.
Gob the Punk started to bring you recognition, which is slightly surprising because of the heavy wig and makeup that you wore. I guess this was the first of your really heavy disguises.
Yes, but, I mean, you say disguise, but what's a disguise? I mean, we all wear disguises. You're doing it. I'm doing it. You're playing the interviewer. I'm playing the silly actor Pratt. You know, I have to play that role. If I didn't, you wouldn't believe what I say, you see. I mean, I couldn't sit here and say to you, I loathe Jane Austen, or I've never been to Vienna, or the best sex I ever had was a hand job in the back of my mother's car. I mean, I couldn't say those things because it's not in the perceived character of Nicholas Craig to say such things.
Which comes back to the gulf between image and reality we were talking about earlier. I'm suddenly thinking of the film being John Malkovich. Perhaps there's an endless series of Nicholas Craigs, and the difficulty is to get hold.
Actually, I don't think I answered that disguise question very well. Do you mind if we have another go? Could you throw it to me again?
I thought we were very happy with that answer.
No, I mean, I really don't want... fucked it, bollocks, Muslims, I've got a big knob and I wank in front of horses. There. You'll have to go again now, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid this is BBC 4. They really don't care. You can say whatever you want as long as it doesn't cost any money. So I think we'll pick up with the interview. In spite of having to earn a living and this slightly, if I can put it like this, Hamlet-like relationship with your mother, you were still choosing your roles carefully.
Hamlet, gosh. Just one thing to be clear about my relationship with my mother is I made it up about what happened on the back seat of the Hillman Minx just now to make a point about misrepresentation in the media. Do you know, in fact, I don't even think it was my anecdote. Do you know, I think Nigel Havers told it to me. Or Miriam Margolyes. I mean, when you work as closely together as actors do, your identities can sometimes become confused. That can happen. So sorry, Nidge, if I nicked your story. Or Miriam. Sorry, Miriam. So, Hamlet, yes. It's a very clever analogy, Mark, because I was angry with my father for leaving, for dying, I don't know. And for a time I did resent my mother's relationship with my stepfather. I didn't actually consider murdering him, but I felt awfully cross the first time they went to Malaga.
I understand it can be too easy to compare things to Hamlet, but there is a pattern of Hamlet-like rejection in your life. Your father, the teacher who didn't want you in his classes, Frankie Howerd and Benjamin Britten didn't want you, the casting directors with their northern bias, and then it has to be said, your mother.
Yes, I mean, we became bestest mates pretty soon afterwards. So obviously, I have a broad circle of friends, and I turn down more work than I accept. So rejection isn't quite. But perhaps the more Hamlet-like thing about me is that I am plagued by doubts. No, plagued is wrong because I nurture my doubts. I mean, I cultivate them. I dwell, like Walt Whitman, in the interstices between crass certainties, you know, so there's a constant ambivalence about the validity of existence. whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune or take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub, must give us pause to sigh before we shuffle off this mortal coil. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. You see, Shakespeare nails it every time, the bastard. What if death were a never-ending nightmare? I mean, it's a no-brainer. Chin up, bodkin down, Soldier-onsky. But why? Aha, that's it. Catch-22. Shakespeare.
Your determination, your willingness to bear what Hamlet called farbles, it paid off, because on the back of the success of Oh No, Not Them, Peter Hall asked you to join the National Theatre Company. Was there a sense of arrival at that point?
Yes. I mean, I don't think it was so much to do with the popularity of Oh No Not. I mean, it was phenomenally successful, yes, but I had done well. I mean, it wasn't the only thing I'd done. I mean, there was the Coriolanus at Chichester. There'd been a Richard II at Glasgow Citizens, quite a rude Richard, in fact, and of course the Duchess of Pisa at the Duke of York's.
Tell me, Drigo, are you with us?
Until the wine turns blue and spaniels play the mandolin.
Why, then let us to Frederico's house.
Aye!
So, I mean, I was pretty much an obvious choice for the National. Nevertheless, I was extremely wary about accepting the offer. After all, big institutions and me don't have the happiest of histories. Ask the governing body of the Burmese Cat Club about that. But of course, the parts they were offering at the National were, very seductive indeed. Atrocitus at the Olivier, Tauja in the Dogs of Toblonsk, and Sir Pity Foppishness at the Littleton, which was probably the most giddying, nausea-inducing, precipitous mountain of my career to date.
I've heard people argue that fops are very contemporary characters, but that's never made any sense to me, because they're not contemporary at all. They have these huge silly wigs and stripy breeches, and they say things like pshaw and zounds. Not contemporary at all. So how do you go about playing them?
No, I don't agree. I think foppishness is very contemporary indeed. There were, well, perhaps not hundreds, but dozens of people who came to me saying, there was a fippity foppishness working in their office or in their football team. And when we toured the prisons, an old lifer came up to me and said, "Tell you what, Gov, that new screw we got on B-Wing, he's a right fippity foppishness." So foppishness was very zeitgeisty, very, very, very recognisable, and horribly real.
I, sir, being, sir, a man of fashion, sir, intent withal to pluck as 'twere a bit of pastry wherein to cup a dumpling, the which to rise withal.
Just take me for a bandolini, sir.
Troth, this fellow's bumpkingly manner hath quite o'erboxed me. I mean, sir, to be lewd this afternoon.
Your performance as Atrocitus in the same season was your first experience of what are euphemistically called mixed reviews. How did you react to that, and in fact to bad reviews in general?
Don't care about reviews, so don't give a shit, never read them. I'm not doing it for the critics, and Atrocitus was one of the best things I've ever done, so there we are.
So you never read the bad reviews?
No, of course not, and you mustn't. Look, I think the critics can be helpful, but if they can't be constructive, then, audiences aren't stupid. They know when an actor's acting well and when he's been let down by bad direction and a poor piece of writing. And the critics, the cliches they trot out, like fine ensemble playing, meaning what? There was a dinner scene, or ingenious design, bloody great slope you break your neck on. And I think my favourite one of all is this talented cast, which roughly translates as they're all black and I can't be bothered to work out which one's which. Well, really, how can you take anyone seriously when they get it that wrong? Not you, Mark. Because you do terribly well with all the smashing things that you write. But it's these Tobys and Matts who pollute the arts pages flaunting their ignorance as if it was a badge of office. And I mean, The Guardian, don't get me started on them. I mean, you know what one of them wrote when we did fisting at the Royal Court in 2002? Where is the play about our place in Europe? I mean, where is the play about... I mean, in the bin, where it belongs, that's where, you know. And actually, a good deal of what's been written about me is motivated by racist bullying. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say, I know, but that's what it is. And I don't make this accusation lightly, but a lot of it is anti-Semitic.
It is a harsh thing to say, and I wonder if it wasn't so much that you're 1/16 Jewish, but they simply didn't like your performance.
Actually, there's only one critic I ever listened to, and that's my mother.
And what did she make of your atrocities?
Well, in fact, uniquely, she didn't... I mean, she couldn't come to the atrocitus, but she's always been the most perceptive. I mean, I always take her counsel very seriously. So it was a great pity she didn't see my atrocitus. But there we are, and she won't now.
I just wonder if her staying away had anything to do with the fact that Atrocitus murders his mother, bakes her in a pie, and feeds her to all his wedding guests.
Well, possibly, yes. I never thought of that. What she said was that she didn't want to go out that night because Stuart Granger was on Wogan, but that could have been a projection of the maternal impulse to suckle as well as consume her young. You might be right. Jesus, us and our mothers, eh? God, oi gewalt. Anyway, it's sadly too late. She didn't see my atrocitus, and now she never will. Unless they bring it back into the repertoire or revive it at Chichester, which is possible.
The years of real success started in the 80s. When did you get to the point where you realised you could choose what you wanted to do?
Oof. Never reached that point as an actor. No. One is a cab on the rank, I'm afraid. That's all. And it's this lack of autonomy that people, journalists, don't understand. I mean, I don't want to go on about the critics again, but, well, Timmy Pigott-Smith, very dear mate, did a movie last year called Entente Cordiale. Not a masterpiece, fine, I mean, we've all done those. But one of the reviewers wrote, Tim Pigott-Smith playing the police inspector for the umpteenth time. Well, A, he's got to pay the bloody mortgage, and B, if that's all that's come in, then what the hell else is Tim supposed to do? And C, I've seen Piggy be bloody good in some things. You know, the one when he had a bath on stage. Tremendous. But actually, I think he played a policeman in that one too. But Entente Cordiale, as I say, didn't get a general release. This is a French paper. It was only released in France. Un film abysmal. Un véritable navet. Navet means a turnip. I mean, it's awful. Well, I rang the pigster up and I said, look, they're calling you a turnip. You've got to sue. And he said, no, it's okay. No one will read the French papers. Well, I thought that was just playing into the hands of these people and actually a bit ungrateful after I'd offered to organise a fighting fund and circulate the translations of the review. But there we are, an example of what actors feel they have to just sit back and take, you know. And I'll give you another. And I wonder if you'll remember this one, Mark. Daniela Nardini, the onlyest Daniela, got a nice little job off the back of playing Anna in This Life. Yes. Next thing she knows, up pops a certain Mr. Lawson on Newsnight Review saying everything she does is the same.
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly what I said, and I felt bad about it. I actually wrote a piece about it.
I downloaded the transcript, actually. Now, look, I know you've got to say something to fill the airtime. I've presented television programmes myself, so I know how very difficult it is. But I mean, to blame an actor for something which is essentially the fault of the writer or the casting director, than which there is no lower form of intelligence on the planet, well, I mean, it's not criticism, it's abuse, and it makes me very, very, very cross indeed. There, done my bit, said my piece on behalf of my profession, all over now. That's what I'm like, you see. I go and then when it's over, right, What would you like to ask me now?
Perhaps we should move on from the subject of the critics.
Oh, please, let's just clear the decks a bit.
Let's pick up on your career, because by the early 90s, looking at your CV,
yes,
extremely successful as an actor, as we've established, but you'd also written books on acting and gardening, I, an Actor, and the Victorian Chamber Pot Garden. You published your 3 collections of cat poems. And on top of that, you presented these programmes. Some people said nostalgic, some people said sentimental, but viewers warmed to your series about seaside architecture, English country railway stations.
Yes, well, I mean, them was the days when you could make a programme that wasn't dumbed down to the point of imbecility. You could literally pitch an idea over lunch on Monday, get it commissioned on Tuesday, and be shooting a steam train the following week. And you know, we just made it up as we went along. No script, not a clue what we were doing half the time. Roaring drunk every night, overspent as much as we liked. But the great thing was that they left you alone and trusted you to get it right. And I think, on the whole, we did. The miserablest mantra of modern town planners. Every high street shall look the same, for the benefit of its identical citizens. Trouble is, people have an inconvenient habit of being different. Second trombone in the works band? A secret poet, perhaps? No. Secretary of the Bowls Club? A greengrocer, maybe. Now, let's see if there's a nice old pier anywhere. The pulse-quickening thrill of steam up. This is what we've lost in the brave new post-Dr. Beeching world of customer announcements and train stations. This platform at Bewdley in Worcestershire is where some of the most startlingly... Oh, God! You know, one forgets that we got 6 million viewers for country stations. I mean, what gets 6 million these days, you know?
Well, Doctor Who, Strictly Come Dancing.
And I think it's very interesting indeed that the viewing figures seem to have gone down in direct proportion to the rise in the number of broadcasting consultants and strategists and suited schedulers. I mean, perhaps that's what's happened to all the missing viewers. You know, they've all become television executives. And you can wait decades for a decision, decades. I mean, that's what happened to the cat poems idea. It's an absolute cast iron. Every cat a different celebrity. Art Malik as the Maharaja of Madhipur. Billy Piper's said she'll do Tabitha Tumbledresses. I mean, we don't have to have her. Might be nice to get your sister to read one. Anyway, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because I've already got more than enough on my plate, and I'm currently enjoying a very nice little canter in another paddock altogether.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about McKendrick and the new Hollywood career in a moment, but I want to talk about another area in which you're one of the leaders in the field, which is voiceovers. Do you ever fear the voiceover work will overshadow the more serious roles?
Well, voice work doesn't get you stopped in the street, which is huge advantage number one. But I don't see that there's an aesthetic conflict between the two. I mean, either way, the actor is using his voice to reveal character detail and transmit information as part of a structured narrative entity. Your injuries could entitle you to compensation, so phone 01870 456 8270615 or 01870 457 8270616. Do you want another one for luck, my dears? Reduced calibration increased the KX-20's range without loss of warhead capacity. By March of that year, the 738 prototype was ready for trials in Peenemünde. "Oh, stop it, Grimplybush," said the Chief Bogsnogget, "or I'll... chew." Caution. This vehicle is reversing. Caution. This vehicle is reversing.
You got the call that a lot of actors dream of, which the big American series, in your case, the crotchety osteopath, McKendrick. A lot of people have commented on just how many British actors there are doing well in American TV now.
Yes. I mean, I was surprised when Josh first called us.
That's Joshua Arendt, the director.
Josh Arendt, yeah, sure. But the reason there's so many Brits out there is we're cheap. I mean, they get 20 episodes out of Hugh Laurie or Eddie Izzard or me for the kind of money that won't even pay for George Clooney's colonic irrigator. So that's how we've all conquered Hollywood, by being cheap as in freedom fries, my dear. Okay, you know what? Skip the exercise routine. Spend 2 more hours a day at the office, and could you manage to drink a little more beer? I guarantee you, in 6 months, you will have no sciatic discomfort whatsoever. And you know why, Dr. McKendrick? Because, sir, you will be incontrovertibly deceased. If I'd wanted to celebrate our anniversary, why would I have booked a whore for this evening? Now, sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to quit wasting my time and get the hell out of my consulting room!
I read that you had to work very hard at the accent in this role, which surprised me because voices have always seemed to come very easily in the past. The Grimply Puss recordings of stories. I think you've done 15 different sat-nav voices. But in this case, I read that you won't even talk to anyone in your English accent on set.
Yes, I mean, that's why I made you wait a year for this. Americans are state of mind, so I have to... I mean, I won't even sit by a pool if there's an English actor in it. I have to hire voice coaches, so if anyone comes out to visit me, they speak American too. And you know, by the time you've paid for that, and flights and hotels and rented automobiles, that's taken a very big handful of pennies indeed out of the piggy bank. But McKendrick has made it easier to get other projects off the ground. I mean, I've got a charming little rom-com script, which, because of McKendrick, I was able to put in a call to Frothy, and that brought Roots and Huge on board, which meant all of a sudden we had Pog for the magazine editor, and Grotbags playing herself.
Just for any non-showbiz types watching, so Roops is Rupert Everett, and Frothy is
Colin Firth. Yes. I mean, we'll be here all night. I mean, people either know who my mates are by now, or they'll have turned over to Celebrity Dog Borstal or whatever. Anyway, we're closing a deal with More 4+1, which is very good news. So in fact, contrary to what we were saying earlier, there's some wonderful television being made right now. The programme's on BBC 4 about 70s TV. Very much looking forward to Poldark Night. And we love your sister's cookery shows, obviously. I mean, I hope you don't go putting the boot into them as well.
You mentioned this a few times. Just to be clear, my sister is an infant teacher in Greenford. I'm sure she'd love to play Tabitha Tumbletresses, but you may be mixing her up with Nigella Lawson, who is no relation at all, I'm afraid.
Oh, really? Well, there we are, you see, back to image and reality. You see, so it's another shame, but things are never what they seem, are they?
Absolutely, and for all that you occasionally moan about show business and acting, I wonder if underneath it all there is a basic satisfaction now.
Well, I mean, it may all come to an end tomorrow, and they'll take me out to face the firing squad, and you know, if that happens, fine. But yes, I guess. Well, I wouldn't say I'm content, because I could never be that. But if I command any respect at all, and you know, after 35 years, I think I've earned a bit of grovelling from people, then that would be not ungratifying. And I think, you know, as an actor, I have begun to feel a freedom, I suppose, that hasn't been there really since those days practising with Mim in the conservatory at Bladder. And that's largely thanks to my wife, Serafina, who puts up with me and my ways, and is generally an absolute rock of Gibraltar. We're soulmates, and she knows every sordid detail about me. So she's my best friend, and we have a boringly conventional life, really. I mean, we cook, we garden, we entertain a bit, and we have the miracle ponies, which aren't really my department, but you know, I help out whenever I'm there, and they give us enormous pleasure. We have 28 of them, 29 this weekend, fingers crossed.
In a way where things are coming full circle now, because in your present life there are very strong echoes of your childhood.
Oh, I've married my mother, of course I have, absolutely. I mean, I make no bones about the Oedipal thing. I mean, look at McKendrick's limp, for God's sake. So except that since you said there's a Hamlet there too, it's got me thinking that I have quite possibly created a new archetype, you know, Oedipal, the Hamlepus. A Hamlepus complex. Actor married to a fairly assertive woman with no idea whatsoever where the next penny's coming from, and 28 bloody horses to look after.
Hamlepusquus, I suppose it would possibly be. 25 years of success. We're coming to this question of what drove you through all that. Was it hard work, luck, or political beliefs?
I suppose it has to be a bit of all three, I think, really. You know, hard work, yes. Luck, of course, although to some extent you make your own. Politics, obviously, fundamental. Some people mellow as they get older. I suppose Zoe Wanamaker would be a good example of that. But politically, if anything, I've become even more of a bloody awkward bastard than I was in the 70s. You know, as soon as it became clear to me that the planet was heading for disaster with all the CO2s and organochlorides we're putting on the crops, which means Alzheimer's and cancer will just roar ahead, I had to do something. And since I became involved with I'm a Celebrity, Get It Out of Me, I'm extremely proud. I mean, there's a lot of work still to be done. But we've already got Waitrose to stock organic pak choi, and we're looking at ways of neutralising radiation. And last year, actually, I had my body chemically profiled. Okay, publicity stunt, but hey, desperate times. And it showed that I have got in my bloodstream asbestos, silica, 20 man-made chemicals, and 14 types of dioxin, all in my blood.
Really? What sort of quantities?
Quantities? What do you mean? I mean, I've got asbestos and 14 types of dioxin in my blood.
But we've all got those, haven't we, as I understand it? I think the average may actually be a little bit more. And isn't it actually impossible to neutralise radiation?
Well, at the moment, yes. I mean, you're right. It is, absolutely. And that's why actors need to work extra hard on finding ways to combat it. Because, to be honest, no one else is prepared to try, certainly not this bunch of fascist idiots who call themselves our government. You know, there's a lot of casual criticism of politically conscious actors. I mean, we're sometimes called lovies, which is not an expression I've heard anyone in the theatre use, so it's complete rubbish. And yet the moment you dare to stick your head above the parapet, suggesting it might be better not to bomb babies, you're accused of self-publicising, and Private Eye puts you in the lovies column. Well, I mean, what's Private Eye's record of humanitarian achievement? Complaining that modern art is too expensive or poetry doesn't rhyme anymore. So actors risk their necks while journalists with salaries and pensions and kids at private school shout Liz and scuttle back to their cowardly Philistine little holes. I mean, would a journalist turn down a lucrative voiceover to go and play football with Africans on comic relief? Would a journalist go to The Wire to tell the truth in a big check-off? No. Too scared, too fat, can't speak, rather write a column about Kylie's clothes. So now who's the trivial one, I mean, I try not to get cross about it, but it's the narrow-minded, anti-intellectual ignorance of what they teach them at Oxford and Cambridge these days. I mean, your researcher, sweet girl, probably been made into Director General since we've been on air, you know, met me at the door, asked me, was I A.S. Byatt? Do I look like Antonia Byatt? Do they recognise anyone who's not an Arctic monkey?
Possibly not. Last year she thought Clive James was Engelbert Humperdinck.
Anyway, I've probably succeeded in adding my name to every blacklist going now, so I'll shut up now, put my affairs in order, and await the arrival of the firing squad.
Nicholas Craig, thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure. Was that all right?
Tomorrow night, Mark talks to the author who's recently killed off his best-known creation, Detective Rebus, Ian Rankin. That's here on BBC4 at 1:25 a.m.